Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you to become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? I'm Steve Ryder, and Dr. Gladden, we just wrapped up with Jeff Leone, who has this really cool scan called the oligoscan, which basically uses your hand to measure heavy metal toxicity and vitamins and minerals in your system, and uses light to be able to get those readings.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I had a chance to try it actually at Radfest and became kind of enamored with it. And I wanted to have him on the show here. It took a few months to get our schedules coordinated, but it's a really fascinating conversation. And he has a really interesting story also in terms of some of his own challenges through life and kind of getting realigned with his own health and well-being. I think it's a really fascinating show, quite honestly. So.
Well, for listeners, as you listen, if there's anything in particular that strikes you, the Gladden Longevity has a supplement shop. And if you use podcast 10, there are lots of supplements in there to help with supplementation and detox and a bunch of other things that can definitely help your health journey. Like in the Age Hackers Plus segment, you talked about HelioCare for skincare. And so if you use podcast 10 in the checkout, it'll get 10% off of your order.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, and I'm joined today by my co-host and friend, Steve Ryder. Steve, how's it going?
It's going good. How was your weekend, my man?
It was an amazing weekend, actually. Yeah, I did some deep meditation on Saturday afternoon.
Ooh, talk about that.
Well, I had some really great insights into life itself. It was very, very cool. So
what were those insights?
The insight was that, everything actually boils down to relationships.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about relationships. So I've been vetting people to collaborate with, and things are put in front of me on a pretty regular basis. And there's a couple things that I've come to understand that are super helpful. And one is, number one, the project is actually not, the win of the project is not about the success of the project or the financial rewards of the project. It's really about the relationships that come out of the project, right? Yeah. Which is cool, I don't think that switch had ever fully clicked over, right?
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And the other thing is that I've really become enamored with this concept of quantum thinking. I think too much thought is binary, right? It's people are focused on actually getting the right answer. And I think it leads to all kinds of strife, right? Geopolitical, religious, cultural, whatever. And in quantum thinking, like in quantum computing, all things are possible simultaneously. And the solution emerges in the context in which the question is being asked, right? With binary thinking, you get answers. And with quantum thinking, you get solutions.
Ooh.
Right? Yeah. And solutions have a shelf life, right? But people get married to their answers. And so if you understand this, so when I'm vetting these things, I'm looking at them from the standpoint of who are these people? Are they inspiring? Are they quantum thinkers? Will we develop a great relationship in the course of doing this project and through the ups and downs of whatever that is? And will we end up as really like great friends at the end of it? And that's become my way of vetting kind of who to work with. Because a project can be great. Like it can be a fabulous project, but if you're with the wrong people, it's a terrible project.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, interesting stuff. But yeah, that was my Saturday. So how about your Saturday? I think you were cross-country skiing.
Yeah, cross-country skiing up in the mountains. They got a ton of snow up there over the last week and a half. And so
nice.
Was up there just enjoying it. And I'm heading back this weekend.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm jealous.
I'm going to probably spend 2 nights up there instead of just one and get 3 days of cross-country skiing in. Since my Packers got knocked out of the playoffs, that kind of dates this.
Yeah, sorry about that.
This episode, but I've got the whole weekend free. I don't care about any other teams, although I do want Detroit to win it all. I am hoping for Detroit because I'm
rooting for Detroit too. I was born in Michigan. I don't think they're going to do it, but I'm rooting for them. But actually, you know, the fact that you've dismissed the entire game structure is kind of binary thinking. I'll just say that. So on that note, we don't care what team you're rooting for. We'd like to welcome our guest to the show, Jeff Lalone. And Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, good. Should be fun. So Jeff, tell us a little bit about how you got into the health space. Tell us a little bit about your journey. It's an interesting journey. I'd like for the audience to be able to resonate with who you are as a person and your own journey and quest and that sort of thing. So maybe start us off a little bit with your journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So my grandfather, father, and godfather, they started Douglas Labs back in the 70s. So I've always been intrigued and fascinated with the health sector. And that being said,
tell people what Douglas Labs did.
Yeah, so they manufactured nutritional supplements, and they primarily sold to healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and now that it's interesting because now that model has shifted, and a lot of people want to buy their supplements just on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, they were one of the first ones to really sell to practitioners only, and that's obviously shifted over the past several years. But that's what they did. Yeah, they made nutritional supplements.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So I was always fascinated with health. That being said, I really wanted to go into the real world and get my own life experience. So I graduated with a finance degree, entrepreneurship minor, and I moved to New York City, and I had an amazing opportunity to move international freight across the world. So I was doing that for about 3.5 years, and I loved it. It was very successful. I really enjoyed my job, but I felt like I wasn't really living my true purpose, and I was quite a bit burned out. So in January,
what did you tell me about the true purpose? What was the rub there for you?
Well, I felt like I was a cog in the machine. I didn't feel like I was doing solely transactional deals. I was helping people move freight, which is obviously very important for the global economy, but I didn't feel like I was living to, I've always been passionate about health. I got into bodybuilding when I was in high school, and I've always loved health. I've always been aware of my habits, my tendencies, my environment. So I really felt that I've always wanted to be in the health space. But again, I wanted to get that outside. I wanted to see how the world worked. I wanted to get some outside experience. I didn't want to just jump right into the family business.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I kind of had a calling to take a break. So I went down to Peru, and I went to this place called Spirit Quest in Iquitos, Peru, and I did ayahuasca for 10 days. And this was actually just when the COVID pandemic was getting underway, and had an amazing experience, was living in the jungle for 10 days. And I got back, and I lasted about a month, and I was like, I knew that I needed to make a major shift in my.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this about your time in the jungle and the use of ayahuasca. What was your experience with that? How did that? That can be very powerful from what I understand. I have yet to experience it, but I understand it can be very powerful. It's basically DMT combined with another plant molecule that sustains the action of DMT, because DMT is fairly short-lived. And DMT is considered the God molecule, or the gateway to the spiritual world or the universe or whatever else. So I'm really curious. You went down there obviously with some questions in mind. And of course, with DMT or any of those things, it's not necessarily the questions you bring, but it has its own agenda for you. So I'm just curious what came out of that.
Yeah, well, my major intention going down was really to detox my physical body. I picked up some bad habits living in New York City and being in the sales realm. And I really wanted to detox my physical body. That was my major intention. But I also gained a lot of clarity into, what is life? Like, why am I here? Like, am I actually doing something that's fulfilling to my soul? And when I got back, and, I went from living in the jungle to back to living in my apartment in New York City and being surrounded by skyscrapers and concrete, and, generally some pretty toxic people, I realized that wasn't an environment that was conducive for me to actually be living my true purpose. But I think furthermore, it really shined light on, what I was doing day to day. And I wasn't in the arena that I wanted to be in, which was health.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's, urban environments are toxic, quite honestly. I've been to New York many times. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I know the East Coast, and been in New York many times. I almost did my internship and residency at Mount Sinai there in New York. They offered me a position, but I ended up going to Case Western in Cleveland to do that. I think in part because I was a little bit intimidated by the city itself, just
Yeah.
that crush of humanity, right? It's just like, wow, it's relentless. It's unrelenting. So you'd been to the jungle, so you had a completely, I mean, that's like going from one extreme to the other. And now you're back in New York. So what did you decide to do about that?
Yeah, so I basically worked for a couple weeks, and at that time, our company, I was the 385th employee. I got in relatively early, and by the time I left, they were at about 1,800 employees. So I saw the company transform quite a bit, and they brought in some upper level management. And I was the year before, I basically built a book of business from scratch as an account executive, and I was the number 2 sales guy in the New York office, and they brought in some upper level management, and I'm the type of person that I can't be micromanaged. I need to do things the way I want to do them. So for me, it was just kind of like this perfect storm of events. And that was when I knew that I needed to take a leap of faith. And it was scary. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have anything else lined up, but I knew that I needed to take that leap of faith and that it would be positive in the long run.
Nice. Yeah, that's courage. I think life is really built on living your best life is really built on courage.
Yeah.
It's really built on courage. When you can look into the unknown and say, no, I'm going to go. And a lot of people back away from that for the concept of safety, right? The concept of security. And yet there is really no security. And it's more secure to actually follow your heart than it is to do anything else. So, but it takes courage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought so. And I was grateful too. Right when I quit my job, actually, I signed up for this biomagnetism course in New Jersey, just across the bridge. And I did that the following week. And this is granted, like right when COVID was like really going into lockdown. So I did that course.
Jeff, what is biomagnetism?
So it's basically placing magnets on different parts of the body over different organs. And the theory is that we have different viruses and bacteria and fungi that can infiltrate certain organs in the body. So these placing of the magnets can basically help promote an environment where the bacteria, the viruses can't live. It was very interesting. The Dr. Garcia is the guy that does these presentations, and I learned a lot. It was just I came out of that conference saying to myself, like, this is the space that I want to be in, whether it's this or something different. I want to be talking about these big matter issues and healing the body.
Cool.
Yeah.
So where'd you go after that?
Yeah, so then I went back to Pittsburgh with my family, and that was granted right when COVID, the lockdown was in. So I spent the next year really soul searching and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. It's funny because everything really changed when I picked up this book called The Carnivore Code. I was in San Diego, and I read this book, and it's almost like the light bulb just went off for me personally. I remember coming back from that biomagnetism course, telling my parents, like, I'm not going to eat any meat, because of everything that I learned in this course, how meat can have all these different viruses or bacteria. And it's funny because I read that book and the light bulb went off. So the first thing I did was I wanted to prove it on myself. So I did a carnivore diet for 35 days. And at the time I had the oligoscan and I was comparing my before and after. And the biggest thing that I noticed was my brain fog completely went away. But at that moment, and my minerals also really, really rebounded. But my biggest takeaway was that I really wanted to get closer to where my food came from. So that led me down this journey of basically getting into sourcing, good quality regenerative products, working at different ranches. And then once I did that, I really wanted to take it another step forward. And I really wanted to get into hunting and actually be providing this for myself. So I ended up moving to the big island of Hawaii to work on this ranch, this 800-acre ranch, 6 miles up on the coast of Kona. And I was hunting wild rams for this landowner. So it was like a dream job at the time.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into hunting and I was living in Hawaii. And then I realized after about 6 weeks that, this is a great life, but I'm not really living my true purpose, and I'm not really helping as many people as I needed to be. So at that moment, I decided to move back to Texas and join my father at oligoscan full time.
Okay. So we've mentioned this word oligoscan a couple of times now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what oligoscan is?
Yeah. So the oligoscan is basically using spectrophotometry to measure intracellular levels of heavy metals, minerals, and vitamins in the tissue of the hand. So spectrophotometry is basically shining the full visible light spectrum from 200 to 800 nanometers. And we're applying this to the skin. So we're measuring basically the bioavailability of the elements in the tissue of the skin.
Mm-hmm.
We use the hand because for two reasons. One, it's a major excretion point in the body. The 4 excretion points are the scalp, the underarm, the hand, and the foot. But it's also the place where the pigment is the same across all races and ethnicities. So it's standardized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we compare the oligoscan to a blood test, for example, a blood test is measuring what's in circulation. It's the transportation system.
Mm-hmm.
The body always wants to remain at homeostasis. So as metals come into the bloodstream, the body's going to do everything in its power to push the metals from the blood to the peripheral tissue, the fat, the organs. If we look at a hair test is measuring the past 3 months of excretion.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with a hair test is the hair isn't a major excretion pathway. We can pick up trace amounts of anything in the hair, but if somebody's holding on to metals, we're not going to know that via testing the hair.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the urine, which is, measuring either the excretion capability when provoked or unprovoked of metals via the urine. It's been the gold standard for a while. So all these different tests are really looking at different things. Hair, blood, and urine are really looking at the extracellular matrix. The oligoscan is looking at the intracellular matrix. It's basically measuring 3 different things: the blood via the muscle and the small capillaries, the cells, and then the interstitial space, which is the beginning of the lymphatic network.
Does it actually report on those 3 compartments, or does it merge them all together into a single report?
Yeah, it merges them all together. It's just, I say that because just thinking about where the light's actually going and penetrating, it has to penetrate at least one cell membrane. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get a reading. So the interesting thing too is that even though we're testing the hand tissue, I can still tell if somebody's had a mercury amalgam filling in their mouth by scanning the hand. And that tells me that the cells are communicating with one another and that it's showing the intracellular levels of what's actually getting into the cell.
Well, toxins are distributed throughout the body, to your point. And fat is a large reservoir for toxins, which is one of the reasons when people go on crash diets, they can get pretty toxic. They can start to feel pretty terrible because they're basically releasing, if you will, all these toxins back into the bloodstream, which is then affecting circulation to other organs, and now the other organs are picking it up, and now they're, screaming uncle, so to speak. So it is interesting. We don't have a single test that actually captures all the elements, right? Because the kidneys are important for detox, the liver is important for detox.
Yep.
The stool is a major elimination pathway, of course. And then you've got hair, you've got saliva, you've got, what you're doing with skin. So I was just curious about the 3 compartments because I think there is some fat in the hand. I don't know if you actually scan over the fat pads in the hand. There's a couple of fat pads, right? The thenar eminence is kind of a fat pad, and then all across the lateral below the pinky, there's fat there too, right? So if that adds anything to the accuracy of the test, or if you play with that in terms of location on the hand.
Well, we try to avoid any major calluses on the hand, but it's funny. I was at a conference, I was at A4M last year, and this person asked me why we measured the 4 points on the hand. And I told them, well, I didn't invent this technology, so I don't know the true answer, but they told me, they were like, well, whoever invented it knew what he was doing, because those 4 points are acupuncture points, but they're also the highest density of where the small capillaries meet the veins. So he was like, they did a pretty good job. So yeah, that's the little anecdote that I have on that. But
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I can tell you that circulation is individual too, just like a fingerprint, right? Yeah. So it's people's venous structures, capillary. It's a little different for every individual.
Yeah.
But it's still an interesting concept. So you're using this, and basically it's almost like poor man's gas chromatography to actually look into the tissue, right, and see what's in there from the standpoint of these minerals and toxins and things. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, when my dad first brought this technology home, I was in college, and I scanned myself, and I was very skeptical. I was like, because my results were terrible. I mean, I was mineral deficient and I had a lot of cadmium in my system and aluminum. And I was like, Dad, I don't really believe in this. And at the time, it was a wake up call. Because, I was living a college lifestyle. I was drinking 4 nights a week. My phosphorus was super low. We see that a lot of times when people that drink, but my test was very bad, just due to being in college. And that was, at first I was like, I don't believe this, but I kept testing myself. And over the years, I started to see my test really improve. And, I've tested over 1,000 people with this device over the past 8 years. And it's really fascinating how some of these correlations, for example, gadolinium. Gadolinium is a rare earth element. We really aren't exposed to gadolinium at all. But so most people are very low. But when I see people that are high, I'll ask them, have you had an MRI with the contrast injection in the past couple of years?
Sure.
9 out of 10 times it's yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, gadolinium is in there.
Yeah. So it's the amalgam fillings. I put together a deck of the top trends that I see and that I've seen over the past 8 years. And another big one is iodine deficiency. And we look at, well, why are we iodine deficient? Well, we're not getting as much iodine in our diet, but I think it's really because of the halogens, the bromide, the chlorine, and the fluoride that we're all been really exposed to. You know, in the 70s, they started, brominating the flour. So we're just getting exposed to a lot more halogens, which in turn is affecting the iodine. And, iodine is one of the most important minerals, especially for pregnant women. They did a study that the IQ of a newborn baby can be impacted by 15 to 30 IQ points for iodine deficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even if you're not terribly deficient, if you're completely replete in iodine, it can actually improve a baby's IQ by about 10 points. It's pretty dramatic. Iodine is a big deal. And it's a big deal for every cell in the body. It's a big deal for thyroid production, of course. So, yeah, super important. Yeah, I had a chance to use your scan at a conference where we met, the Radfest, actually, back in September. And it's taken us this long, I guess, to get together. But yeah, so what are some of the other major patterns that you've seen?
Yeah, so the big one is mercury amalgam fillings.
Okay.
And it's usually in people over the age of 40. It's a real issue. The $1 million question is, how do we get rid of the mercury? You can look into chelation. You can look into this compound called OSR, but it's not legal in the US. Zeolite has been helping, but this mercury is very insidious. And the problem is it really gets deep into the tissue. And I see, people that have had amalgam fillings, it's just off the chart high. And it really affects mercury really will affect vitamin D, phosphorus, selenium, and iodine, and also zinc. So yeah, it's been interesting. The thing is too, it's like, if somebody's got really high mercury, you don't want to dump all that mercury at once, because the body is keeping it there for a reason. If that person was to dump all the mercury at once, the person's going to go through severe detox reactions.
That's the problem with chelation. You're pulling out all that toxin all at once, and so the kidneys are exposed to that on the way out, right? And so it can be a real heavy load on the kidneys to try to deal with that. We've had really good success with saunas, quite honestly, and then using oral metal-free kind of detox to help pull it out through the stool. And out through the skin, because that seems to be the least toxic to the body, right? And we've seen dramatic drops in mercury levels for people that, the other group is the people that, not only with the fillings, but people that eat a lot of fish. And we think fish is a healthy food, and then the next thing you know, I'm eating sushi all the time. What are you eating? Well, I'm eating all this, that, and that. And that's like, well, let's check your mercury, because we see it super high many, many times. So
absolutely. And sauna is so important, and it's a major excretion pathway, and it's just super important, especially for aluminum toxicity. Yeah. That's another one that I see a lot, is aluminum toxicity. I see that
antiperspirants, right? So a lot of antiperspirants have aluminum, and it's been linked to dementia, as you know. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So yeah, you don't want to be using these, keep your armpit dry type deodorants. So
yeah, and it's not only deodorants are definitely the big one. Another one is antacids, like the Pepsi AC.
Yeah,
I didn't realize this, but in college, I had this alcohol flush syndrome. My face would get red when I drank, and as a college kid that was just immature, I would take these Pepsi ACs before I drank. Little did I know that they were loaded with aluminum. Okay. So you really got to be careful with over-the-counter medications. Yeah,
you're lucky you graduated.
2016. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've come a long way since then. But so yeah, aluminum toxicity is another one I see, and that pairs with silica deficiency. Silica and aluminum has an antagonist synergist relationship. Iodine deficiency. Then there's the antimony, which is found in plastics. I tested this woman about 2 months ago down in Florida, and she was overweight, having really trouble losing the weight. She said it just won't come off. I know my hormones are messed up, and I tested her, and her antimony was really high.
Interesting.
And it's interesting because antimony is found in plastics. And I asked her, I said, what kind of water do you drink? And she said, I drink bottled water. I've been drinking bottled water for the past 10 years. She lives in Florida.
Okay.
The heat, the sunlight is leaching the plastic into the water.
Right.
Sure enough, she has high antimony. She can't lose weight. Her hormones are disrupted. It's about connecting the dots.
Do you have a strategy for getting antimony out of the system? Is it, if somebody stops drinking from plastic containers, will it go out, or do you need to use a sauna there?
Yeah, I have this 3-prong approach, and it's basically, one, it's reducing the inputs where it's coming in. So
Right.
in her case, it'd be reducing the plastic use. 2, maximize the outputs. So sweating, breaking a sweat. And then 3, providing the building blocks. So making sure that she's getting enough minerals in her diet.
Yeah.
I also believe that, plastics are xenoestrogens. A lot of the estrogens will be stored in the liver. And most people that are, experiencing some kind of illness, you got to look to the liver and the kidneys. Usually the liver is blocked. So from my research, I think potentially coffee enemas could be a good way to help the liver health. But yeah, absolutely. Sauna is one of the best ways.
Yeah. Yeah, we love sauna. There's a lot of great data on sauna, as the audience knows, from longevity perspective too.
Yeah.
Dr. Gladden and Jeff, this is a question for you. How often do you recommend clients, patients to sauna?
Well,
generally.
Yeah, I mean, the data from Scandinavia was 4 days a week for 20 minutes, actually 19 minutes at, I think, 175 to 180 degrees was where they got massive changes, right? So they followed guys for 20 years and they had a 55% reduction in Alzheimer's, dementia, 50% reduction in cardiac events and strokes, and then a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality in cancer, I believe. So it's a dramatic kind of thing. And you can increase heat shock proteins with exercise also, particularly if you're out there sweating, doing things like that. And I'll just interject this about cardio in general, is that we're now measuring the Klotho gene for our clients, and we can measure Klotho levels. And it turns out when you have higher Klotho levels, you live longer, your kidneys are healthier, your blood vessels are healthier, your brain is healthier, and having high Klotho. So when you're lifting weights, you're actually lowering Klotho. When you go for a run, you actually raise Klotho. So your cross-country skiing is raising your Klotho. And resistance training is important. You can't get away from it, but it should never be the only thing that anybody does, right? So, yeah, anyway, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree to that. I mean, I usually tell people, a couple times a week is great.
That's it. That's perfect.
A couple times a week. I do remember Dr. Klinghardt from one of his YouTube videos that he mentioned that 95% of the metals are released in the first 5 minutes. I don't know how accurate that statement was, but it just always has kind of stuck with me. So
first 5 minutes of the sauna?
Yeah. So I just try to always wipe down, when I'm in there. But I mean, sauna is it's great. I think it's one of the better healing modalities and detox modalities for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we would agree with that. And really, people always ask me, well, should it be a Swedish sauna or an infrared sauna? Quite honestly, it doesn't matter. I mean, the data is out of Sweden was in, the hot saunas, so to speak. But there's data out of Japan that's very good for infrared saunas in cardiovascular disease and peripheral vascular disease. I think the idea is just raise your body temperature, quite honestly.
Raise the body temperature and break a sweat. Yeah, I actually do a sweat lodge every Wednesday with a group down in Buda, but it's just.
I thought maybe this was back in the jungle.
No, this is actually here in Texas, but it's just you leave that sweat lodge, and I mean it's very spiritual as well. But I mean you can just feel your body, you feel lighter, you feel great.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So this scan, is this something people can use in their homes, or what's the story with this? Is this more something you go to a physician's office to use, or you keep it in the back trunk of your car? What's it?
Yeah, well, technically you could, but we sell primarily to healthcare providers and clinics, just because once you get the test, it's about interpreting the test and understanding what you're looking at.
Sure.
So yeah, right now we're primarily selling to healthcare providers and clinics of that nature, but the test is fairly straightforward and is very simple. The only metric you need to know is your blood type, height, and weight.
Okay. Yeah. So how many people know their blood type, though? Not very many. I ask a lot of people this, and they don't know.
So. Oh, yeah. Not many people do. I mean, it's like 50-50. When I do shows, I usually buy the little Eldon card kits. They're like $10 on Amazon, and you can just prick your finger and determine your blood type. But I always stock up on those before shows because you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't know their blood type. But it has to do with the protein, the antigens in the protein, and each of the different blood types.
That's right.
Has a different atomic emission spectra similar to the elements. So it really does make a difference. You don't want to do the test if you don't know your blood type.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been looking at bringing it into the practice. I kind of wanted to have this conversation with you before we did, but yeah, good stuff. So what's the trajectory for the company at this point in time in the technology? Do you have other things that you're planning, or what's going on?
Yeah, so the original developer is in France, and he basically makes the calls on what elements we add to the test. That's beyond my jurisdiction, but we added tin to the test a couple months ago. We've added different elements like fluoride over the past couple years. So I believe we're just going to continue to, I believe the next thing we're going to be adding is collagen. I'm not a biochemist, so I'm not sure how they figure these different elements and molecules out to add. But yeah, the goal would be to try to add as many as we can.
How many are you currently testing?
How many clinics?
No, how many are you currently testing? How many elements are you currently testing?
Yeah, 21 minerals, 15 heavy metals, and 7 vitamins.
Okay.
Yep. And the vitamins are really interesting. Specifically the B9. When I test somebody and I see low B9 on the test, it can be an indication that they have the MHTR genetic mutation.
MTHFR.
Yeah, exactly. And what's even more interesting is the vitamin D. And I had this conversation with Dr. McCullough at the biohacking show this year. It's when the vitamin D is low, we're not looking at blood vitamin D, we're looking at intracellular D. When the D is low, you want to look at the mercury, because we know that mercury prevents the vitamin D receptors from absorbing in the body. So the more mercury somebody has, the more the vitamin D can be affected. And really, that's the case with a lot of these different heavy metals and minerals. I like to personally look at the heavy metals first and then look at the minerals, because that gives me an understanding of why they could be low in the first place.
Yeah. You mean look at the minerals first and then look at the vitamins, I think, right? So
either one.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, it's very cool. No, I like this a lot. And it's the interesting thing is you get instant feedback. It's like you do the scan and the results are there, within a minute or whatever. It's not like you have to send it off to a lab or someplace and wait. That's the cool thing.
Yep, it's instant. It takes like less than 10 seconds and the results are immediate. So for me, it's really been about understanding the test report.
Yeah.
I've spent the past couple of years and I've got some great mentors. Dr. John Gamble is one of them. He's our naturopath in Australia. He's been with the oligoscan since the beginning, and he actually wrote a book called Mastering Chronic Disease, Toxicity, Deficiency, and Infection. And he talks about, from his clinical experience, how these different heavy metals and minerals are correlating with chronic disease and different infections. So for me, it's really just been about trying to understand, this test is to the best of my ability. And, I also am the guinea pig myself. I mean, I've been testing myself every week for the past, 5 years. Probably too much. You're not going to see a lot of variance week to week, but I like to experiment with different things and see what moves the needle, so I can tell people what actually works.
Yeah, beautiful. Good.
Yeah.
What are some of the tricks that you've learned in all of your testing, at least for yourself? Not that it's generally applicable necessarily, but I'm curious to see what you've learned.
Yeah. So the biggest ones are that, when I test people, and this kind of leads into, what I was talking about earlier about the animal-based, carnivore diet. The most nutrient-dense form, in my opinion, nature's multivitamin is beef liver. And a lot of people, a lot of test reports, a lot of clinics ask me, how do we increase copper, zinc, selenium, the B vitamins? And I'm just a true believer in animal-based nutrition. So when I test people that don't eat a lot of animal-based, meat or milk or eggs, I see them generally pretty deficient in their minerals. So for me, and I've actually watched my own test report dramatically change. I mean, I would have been in the MTHFR genetic mutation category back when I tested myself in New York City. My B9 is now practically normal. And to me, it's been a testament of my diet. But I tell people, it's just really about getting the basics down. Environment, lifestyle, diet, exercise, breaking a sweat, reducing a lot of the, bad things, right? The seed oils, electromagnetic radiation. Dr. McCullough talks about that. Right now, most people have a magnesium deficiency. And I really believe that it's probably correlated to our exposure to computers and Wi-Fi and tablets and phones. It's also probably because our soil's depleted and we're not getting a lot of that from our food.
Yeah.
So
we see that all the time. Magnesium deficiency. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really take the approach of, getting the basics down and, trying to get as much of this stuff from our food as we can. I do like some supplements. I do have some staples because we live in a world where our food just isn't as nutrient dense as it was. So I really like MSM for sulfur. that's been the one mineral that I've really watched closely. And, my test is almost got to be perfect. But the salt thing, it's been a journey, but the sulfur shockingly is low. And, I eat a lot of animal based, so it's interesting, but the MSM is one of those supplements that really moves the needle. Iodine is a big one. I like to take iodine.
You can overdo iodine. You can actually crash your thyroid if you take too much iodine, just so the audience understands. So it's not that, always remember biology is an economy of balance here, right? It's not about how far can you push something, but so many people are iodine depleted and they've gone to sea salt instead of, salt with iodine in it, et cetera, that getting some iodine in, on a fairly regular basis. Like I wouldn't do it every day personally. I might take it twice a week because you don't want to crash your thyroid. That's a problem. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You got to start small. Lynn Farrow talks about that in her book. Mm-hmm. And if somebody has a lot of mercury or a heavy metal and they just dive right into 10 milligrams of iodine, they can have a Herxheimer reaction. Yep. So you definitely do.
Herxheimer reaction. So this is a detox kind of reaction. It's where your body's seeing something. It can happen in a variety of technologies, right? So let's say you jump in the sauna for the first time or the ozone sauna for the first time. And all of a sudden you're liberating toxins, you're ozonating things, and your body's detoxing to the point where you've liberated these toxins into your system. Now you're sick from those toxins. That's what a Herxheimer reaction really is. So you've got to go slow to the point that Jeff's making as you kind of build back towards health. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. I also really like cilantro, coriander, cumin. Yep. I do eat primarily animal-based, but I think it's all about balance. I think it's all about listening to your body and how you respond. I think everybody's definitely different.
Yeah. Spirulina and chlorella can be very helpful in the detox process also.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I guess the last thing I'll say is particularly regarding aluminum, because that's really what my generation and really everybody needs to be focusing on right now. And the big thing with that is breaking a sweat. Mm-hmm. My mentor, Michael Fessler, he has a skincare product line named Herbalex. They do like non-synthetic ingredient, basically vasodilator creams that help draw the aluminum using natural ingredients. I believe a couple of them are seaweed and curcumin, or I think it's coriander seed. But basically they help vasodilate the skin to allow the metals to basically come out via the skin. So it would be great in a sauna. Mm-hmm. But the aluminum is basically getting trapped. So antiperspirant, for example, when people put the antiperspirant on, it's blocking the lymphatic system from draining that aluminum. And we break the aluminum down into salts and then we sweat it out via the skin. So for people, like when I'll test people and I ask them, your aluminum is high. Do you have a hard time breaking a sweat? Most of the time the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. So for them, it's really identifying where the lymphatic system is blocked and, basically encouraging the body to sweat more. So it's really about the basics. I really like to have the fundamental basics in check and making sure that, what you're putting in your body is clean and nutritious.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So where can people learn more about this?
The oligoscan.com. We have a website which has a lot of the information online. I have my own podcast.
How do you spell it for people? Oligoscan.
Yeah. So it's the oligoscan. So OLIGO scan, SCAN.com.
Got it.
Yep. I also have my own podcast called the Intracellular Podcast, where I go through a lot of these trends and I go through a lot of different ingredients that I believe work. I just had Jeff Hoyt on. He has this zeolite calanophthalate company, Zeolite Labs. Yep. So one of my big questions is, all right, we got high metals. What do we do now? So for me, it's been trying to identify natural sources that can help assist the body and get rid of the metals.
Yeah.
The body's only going to get rid of what it's willing to get rid of. You can't put a gun to the body and say, get rid of all these metals. It's a slow process and you don't even want to get rid of all the metals in one day. It's working with the body to get rid of the metals. And I had Jeff Hoyt on, the founder of Zeolite Labs, and he talks a lot about this, the body's ability to detox on its own pace.
That's right. And zeolite is a binder, just so people understand. It'll bind different substances, quite honestly. So, yeah, I'll say one more thing about saunas, which is that if you're going to start doing saunas, you need to kind of ramp up to that too, because we were talking about being in there 19, 20 minutes at 180 degrees or something. When you first step into a sauna, you may not be able to do that. You may be in there 5, 6, 7 minutes and say, I'm done, I'm out. And you should listen to that and step back out. And it's kind of like, it's called sonic conditioning. You kind of train and condition yourself to be able to be in there 20 minutes, 25 minutes or whatever. So if you're listening to this, just realize that's a piece of the puzzle too. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Steve, any questions you have?
No, I'm really interested in trying this scan out and seeing what it shows for me.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about orcas, how they eat shark livers. I was thinking, when you started talking about eating beef livers, it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something to maybe we're all related to orcas here somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's like any wild animal, the first thing they'll eat are the organs.
Yeah.
If you look at any wild animal,
it's
first
nutrient density. Yeah, that's
nutrient density. Yeah. And also the Native Americans, they would use the whole animal, nose to tail.
Sure.
So my whole thing over, what my evolution now has been to, after hunting is to utilize the whole animal. And I really believe that, most people go into the store and they say, they want meat, right? So they get a ribeye or they get ground beef, right? But that's only 1/3 of the equation. The second and third part of the equation is the organ meats, but also the bones to get, the glycine and the collagen.
That's right.
And I think that it's more than just eating meat. We got to eat nose to tail. We got to start including all these.
It is an interesting point that you make, and there is value. I'm not a vegetarian. We do tend to eat a lot of plants, and because the highest nutrient density on the planet is in plants, right? There's no doubt about it, by a factor of like 15 or 20. That being said, there is value to animal protein, and I think part of the thing with animals is that if you're hunting and you know that the animals got living in a clean environment where you're getting a clean liver, that's one thing. But the liver does concentrate toxins. And so if you've got cattle that have been raised in some, pen, fed who knows what, and shot with who knows what hormones and antibiotics and everything else, you don't really know what that liver is all about. You may not actually be wanting to eat that liver. So
you don't want to eat that liver. No,
right,
you do not want to eat a liver from a factory farmed cow or a Wagyu cow that's been eating chocolate bars in plastic.
Exactly.
You don't want to eat that liver. No,
that's right. That's my point. So I think there's value in the nutrient density of meat. I will say this though, that methionine is high. Amino acid methionine is high in the carnivore diet, and methionine has been associated with accelerated aging. So just, it's back to this economy of balance. It's not about all I eat is steak, right? 5 days. Don't take that as a message here. And it's also, I don't think it's all about all I eat is kale and asparagus. I think really you want a mixed diet, but you really want that colorful diet. I think you really want lots of different plants. The body loves variety and it loves nutrient density. So that's
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about balance for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
Jeff, when you talk about those other 2/3 of the organ meats, as well as the connective tissue, the glycine and the collagen, how do you recommend people to get that nutrition?
Yeah. So you can buy bones and make your own bone broth. You can buy the bone marrow. Those are two great, easy ways. Me personally, every time I hunt a new animal, I try to utilize one new part of the animal. So just a quick story. I recently discovered that the hooves are an incredible source of gelatin. And the last deer that I shot and I harvested and I basically skinned the hooves and then I put them in a crock pot. And I basically, what you do is you basically take off the actual hoof, and in the inside, there's just this like little nugget of like gelatin. It's actually pretty good.
It's collagen, really. It's where Jell-O comes from.
It's gelatin, exactly. So that's maybe a little bit more advanced, but a great place to start is just the bones, just making your own bone broth.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you being with us on this podcast, Jeff. So
yeah, this was awesome. Thanks for having me, and it's an honor to be here and share my story, and hopefully it can help impact others' lives.
Yeah, beautiful.
This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by the new Gladden Longevity Blood Vessel Formula. The Mediterranean diet is often associated with heart health and longevity, and while red wine is often highlighted, it's actually the herbs traditionally used in this diet where the real magic is.
And Mediterranean herbs such as summer savory, basil, rosemary, and tarragon contain potent antioxidants that have been found to inhibit something called RNOx activity. And RNOx is a major promoter of oxidative stress in the arterial wall, which causes the arteries to age, increases blood pressure, decreases sexual function, etc.
I love that this formula has summer savory because I've never seen it in the fresh herbs section at any of my local grocery stores, even the health ones like Natural Grocers. And to get these benefits in a tincture, brilliant, Dr. Gladden.
Well, I'll tell you, I've heard from our clients and from my own use of it that they love it as well. I just take a few drops or a dropper full and put it in my tea. It is alcohol-based. Tincture is the nutrients are extracted with ethyl alcohol. I drop it in my tea, it tastes good, or I drop it in water, it tastes good. And it's so nice to know that you're getting those health benefits to keep your arteries young. We love it.
Get 10% off your order of the new Gladden Longevity Blood Vessel Formula when you use the code podcast10 at gladdenlongevitysshop.com. That's podcast10 at checkout when you visit gladdenlongevitysshop.com.
If you want to live young for a lifetime, keeping your blood vessels healthy is key. So check out the new Gladden Longevity Blood Vessel Formula to assist you in your quest to make 100 the new 30.
Jeff, what do you think we're going to be doing differently 3 to 5 years from now?
I think we're going to see a shift into small communities and people having a greater impact and relationship with their food and growing their own food. I think that a lot of people are going to seek out smaller communities instead of the big cities. That would be my vision.
Is that something you're doing? I think you're in the Austin area, but Austin's it's a city, of course, but it's got suburbs and it's got the hill country right next to it. Are you in a smaller community or are you back in the city or where are you now?
Yeah, I'm about 10 minutes south of the city. So I'm definitely still, in a little suburb, but it is something I'm working towards. I'll most likely be moving to Virginia.
Okay.
My goal is to start a little wellness retreat center where I can have people come and work and learn the land and be in relationships with nature and animals and whatnot. So that is the goal. Hopefully that's probably my 2-year vision, but I'm definitely in the process. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. If you were going to do one research trial over this next year, is there something that you're kind of itching to get a look at, something you really want to uncover?
Yeah. My biggest thing right now is zeolite and really seeing the efficacy and if it's actually able to get rid of metals in the body. The biggest challenge, well, it's not really a challenge, but I guess right now, most of the zeolites are the ones that I've experimented with I've seen results with in my oligoscan is powder where you mix with water and you ingest it. And then that zeolite by and large is getting absorbed in the gut.
Right.
Is that a bad thing? I don't think so, because I believe most people have gut issues, right? So even though it's just absorbed in the gut, I still think it's probably a positive. But I would say my number one research study to focus on this year would be the effects of zeolite and heavy metal elimination. And we've actually already been leading some of these trials with zeolite labs. And there's another company that we're going to be working with this year. So I would say that. I would also say maybe aluminum and the impacts that it has on cognitive function in the brain.
Okay, cool. Yeah. If we were going to get together here a year from now and celebrate something, is there something you'd like to be celebrating?
Transformations on the oligoscan tests. I'm really trying to determine how to get rid of the mercury in the body. And I test a lot of people that I see it really high in. And I haven't personally dove into the homeopathics, even though some doctors have had success with it. But one of the challenges that I'm having is, how do we get rid of this mercury? And is it even possible to get rid of when you see it really in the excess range? So I would hope that in a year from now, I've been able to find something or a way to help people get rid of this mercury, because I believe it is definitely affecting people's lives and well-being.
Yeah, some of the mercury some of these toxins can get pretty, I'll call it, stuck into the structure of the body, and they become pretty immobile, and they're difficult to measure, but they're still there having an impact. So these toxins are really a big part of the whole cancer story. The fact that we live in such a toxic environment these days, people can't get rid of this stuff, and their immune system gets suppressed, and there's this new trend of people under the age of 50 getting cancers at higher rates, kind of globally. Yeah, I think this whole detox thing is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I'm on social media, and I'm definitely on my phone a lot more than I like to be. And, we get wrapped into, going on Telegram channels and looking at, alternative sources of news and whatnot. And I feel like I would be maybe better off without my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that keeps me up at night. Yeah. I mean, I think I think most people are a little bit aware of where our country's headed. And I think it's definitely a little bit alarming if you're a citizen here. So I would say just my propensity to be on my phone a lot more than I would like to, and how that affects my day-to-day and my well-being. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does have a real impact, I think.
Yeah.
Not only interrupting sleep, but, all the EMFs and all the 5G and all the other stuff that we're all Wi-Fi that we're bathed in all the time.
And also just comparing our lives to other people's lives. And, I think that's another big thing. It's like we feel the need to travel or feel the need to do this or to have this or to have that. And it's like, why can't we just be happy with our own life and in the moment?
Well, there is never, ever happiness in comparison, ever.
Yeah.
There is never happiness in comparison.
Yeah.
So it's almost a category to just set to the side. It's like, it's a useless category. It actually accomplishes nothing. So I've set it aside years ago. It's like, it means nothing to me. What somebody else has is fine, whatever. I don't care. It's, so yeah, it's good. And then let me ask you this. What are the top 3 hacks you're using to epitomize your youthfulness outside of, using the oligoscan to optimize your minerals and vitamins?
Yeah, my top 3 hacks. Well, number 1 for me, and I might be biased because of my Lebanese and Italian heritage, is the sunlight.
Nice.
I've always found the sun. I've always chased the sun. I have to be in the sun. I lay out for a couple hours a day if I can. So the sunlight,
I'm going to tell you about a product called HelioCare. Write that down. HelioCare.
Okay.
HelioCare. It's made from a fern called Polypodium leucotomus.
Okay.
It has an SPF of 5, which sounds like very little, but it basically protects the skin from skin cancers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so if you're going to be in the sun, and I'm in the sun too, because I live in Puerto Rico a fair amount of the time, I take HelioCare every morning. So if you take HelioCare, your skin will thank you.
Nice. Okay, great.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
Share that with you. So sorry I interrupted you. So what's number 2 besides the sun?
Number 2 would probably be pretty recent. I just bought a grounding mat for my bed.
Okay.
And you plug it into the wall and it supposedly grounds you to the ground. I've been sleeping really, really well with it. I've felt a noticeable difference and I'm dreaming every night. So that's been a real big upgrade for me. I did convert my bedroom into an EMF sanctuary. So I painted the walls and I put down cork flooring and basically shielded the whole place. And I worked with a company called Shielded Healing to help me with that. It's been a game changer.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And then number 3, honestly, I'd probably have to say beef liver. It just really, for me at least, I've seen the dramatic results in my oligoscan test before and after. And
interesting.
It's one thing that I at least mention to people that I test and that I see the deficiencies in is beef liver. Now, obviously, like we mentioned, it's got to be from an animal that was, regeneratively raised and, not fed crap. It's got to be from a good source. But I think those are my top 3. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jeff. We really appreciate you staying on to answer those questions, and wish you all the best with what you're going to be doing in Virginia. That sounds very cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a process. We were supposed to move there last summer, and the place didn't even have heat or hot water, so we had to hire some contractors to come in and make it nice, but in due timing.
Heat and hot water are overrated, man.
Yeah. What part of Puerto Rico are you in?
I'm right by the rainforest, if you know Puerto Rico. El Yunque, at the beach there. Yeah, it has the cleanest air in the world. It's it's this beautiful vortex of energy there. It's almost, it's incredible. Yeah.
Is that near Rincon?
No, it's on the other end of the island.
Other end. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome.
Good. Yeah. But it's a good environment for, clean living, so to speak.
Yeah.
As long as they're not spraying some pesticide someplace.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, cool, man. All right. Well, good. We'll catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation. Thanks for having me again.
You bet.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to gladdenlongevitypodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.